Hi everyone, it's Emily, and today I want to discuss the difference between handmade and manufactured clothing. In fashion, we hear terms thrown around all the time like handcrafted, handmade, craftsmanship, artisanal, but what do these terms actually mean, and why would one appeal to a customer over another? So these terms like handcrafted, handmade, craftsmanship, artisanal, they refer to some part of the garment being hand stitched or hand sewn. It could be a zipper, a collar. It also could refer to one person sitting down and doing the whole garment themselves rather than an assembly line. Shout out my label, that's exactly what I do. I'm a one-woman show. So alternative to handmade clothing is like an assembly line manufactured clothing where there's not as much human involvement. For me, I love that handmade has that human touch and that human connection, and I appreciate that somebody will sit down and sew the whole thing themselves and take that time. I think that involves a lot of passion, and it's not necessarily about the money for them, and I want to support that. I love seeing people pursue their passions, and that's why I love to support handmade. And for the record, just because something is manufactured doesn't make it better or worse. There's too many processes and nuances and customer preferences as well that could play into a garment being better. It could be the durability, some prefer something more sustainable. It could be, the craftsmanship or the quality or the style. Those could all be perfected in manufacturing. They could be, it really just depends on the manufacturer or who's hand making the garment. Also, fun fact here, when assembly line made clothing emerged, it was considered better and more stylish to have, whereas handmade clothing was considered, not as exclusive, cheap, but now it's just manufactured clothing has just grown to these astronomical levels where handmade is now considered, it's really flipped so that handmade is considered superior and more exclusive. So when I'm making clothes for my brand, I do the pattern making, the draping, cutting, sample making, sewing. I do that all myself, mostly by hand, except when I'm sewing together a garment, I'll mostly use a sewing machine. So what's so great about handmade clothing? We can't just say that the human touch and human connection makes it better. It's like I said, it's not that simple. There's too many processes and factors and preferences that could play into something being better. And I think as humans, we want like an easy answer, an easy one-word answer. And I just don't think you can say that for this particular topic. What I can say in terms of durability and longevity, I think that when there is one person paying attention to how the garment is being constructed and they can see every stitch and they're looking at every seam, that there is a sense of quality control there. But that can also be in manufacturing. It really depends on the manufacturer. And for example, like for my own brand, I'll use a French seam, which is basically a seam sewn inside out and then again right side together. But it basically encases the seam so that the fabric can't fray. But there can be manufacturers that do that as well. So if you buy like a designer piece, you might see French seams. It's very expensive to do in manufacturing, but not as crazy to do if you're doing it on your own. Then there's other construction related things like I'll use a smaller stitching for the appropriate fabric. This can play into longevity and durability of the garment. It means that the fabric won't come apart. But there are instances where you want to use a longer stitch. Sometimes when the fabric is stretchier, you might want a little bit more ease. So these are all things that I pay attention to because I'm hand making the garment. But like I said, if you are a manufacturer, you can pay attention to these qualities as well. And the longevity and durability really plays into, but purchasing an investment piece. And I think as a small maker, someone who's handcrafting the garment, it is sometimes more expensive, and that's because we're paying attention to the tiniest details on the garment. The next thing is exclusivity and small batches. So if you're hand making it, you're probably not producing, 300, 500 units like you would manufacturing. So you can really create something that's, limited in quantities, and it's exclusive to your customers. And some designs are more difficult to create in an assembly line rather than a person individually making them. So you can create really unique designs that are really special. The next thing is custom sizing and styles. So hand making, because you're individually making each garment, you can adjust like a hip width or the measurements for the bust or the waist. You can lengthen hemlines, shorten hemlines, swap style details. This is really hard to do if you're manufacturing because there's so many processes in place. You can't just change, one pattern for one customer, and you're also probably not making it to order. So the next thing would be Deadstock Fabrics. So a lot of manufacturers, they have a ton of leftover fabric, and that's where I would come in and use that fabric to make a style for my own collection because I'm using, I'm not producing as much because it's in limited quantities. So, this can really play into the eco-friendliness, which some customers would prefer over a manufactured clothing. And the last thing I'll mention is transparency. Because I'm hand making everything myself, it's not hard to explain to my customers where the clothes are coming from. Are my workers being paid a livable wage? What are their working conditions? Because it's me. So I think for some manufactured clothing and massive brands, they have such a large scale global supply chain. You never know what's going on in the background. So transparency is definitely, if that's something you value, then handmade would probably be the way to go. So I hope that answers some of your questions. Like I said, one isn't always necessarily better than the other, but there are certain qualities or factors, nuances, processes that a customer may prefer that are handmade over manufactured or vice versa. So for me, like I said, the number one reason is the human connection, the human touch, the fact that someone will sit down and, put all their personal time and labor into one garment and be paying attention to those little details, like the stitching and all that. So I love to see people passionate about that. I love to, I want to support that. And it really puts a smile on my face to know that someone's pursuing their passion. And that's why I prefer handmade. So comment below about what you think about handmade versus manufactured clothing, and subscribe to my channel and click the bell to get notified when I upload new videos. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a great day.